Hi, everyone. Here today we have Celeste Hall, NCDA Board Trustee for K 12. Celeste currently works with the Virginia Community College System, providing training and support to their statewide career coaching program for students in high schools and community colleges. Her education career includes classroom teaching and roles as a school counselor and career counselor in high schools and a technical center. Her work as a career counselor is focused on connecting students to work-based learning opportunities. Welcome, Celeste. We're glad to have you here at SkillsLine Presents.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, looking at your history and having conversations with you over the years, you've got a very strong passion around human skills. And I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what sparked that passion.
Well, as you know, I worked in high schools for over around 30 years or so. And as I worked in high schools with high school students, sort of the theme that, as I look back over the years, kind of pops up is that I was always trying to find better ways to help students transition from the high school to what's next. And as we began to work with employers, we have heard this theme for many years. We hear it now about give us a student who has good employability skills, soft skills, as we call them, human skills now. And we can work with that student and we can bring them into our company and give them the other skills that they need. But we need them to bring those human skills. So that's a big part of what drives me to focus on the human skills.
That connection, that direct connection to employability.
Yes, absolutely. And whenever we worked with employers, they would always stress that. And it seems like over the years, those skills that we used to learn from our families and at home, some of that sort of got pushed into the school setting a little bit more, or students weren't learning those skills at home or didn't have opportunities maybe to do part-time work where a lot of those skills are learned.
And it's interesting when you think about that transition from these skills being learned in the family, right? Or being learned very early on through working. Really, I don't want to call them starter jobs, right? How do you think education can bring these skills to students?
Mm-hmm.
Is that through providing work-based learning experiences? What do you recommend?
Well, I think certainly work-based learning opportunities are part of the story or part of the way that education can provide those skills. But I think that educators are already doing a lot of interventions, or these skills really are already worked into the educational system, if we think about it, but we just often don't bring them to awareness as much as we could. For example, the whole educational system is set up on attendance. And we know that coming to work is one of the most important employability skills. As the schools are set up, that we encourage attendance, we encourage students to be on time, we encourage certain types of behavior in the classroom. And so all of these things are being done. We offer leadership opportunities and working in teams and all those sorts of things. But maybe we don't bring to awareness that the importance of these skills in all areas of life and how that they can translate into, very important skills for moving from school to work.
That's right. And that awareness helps us as people, as humans, to develop those skills because we can be intentional about it through that awareness. I remember talking with you about the SCANS report and necessary skills. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've seen the changes in the perception or how people think of employability skills and necessary skills and soft skills, what we call human skills now? How have employers and education changed their perception of those over time?
The whole time I've been in education, I've heard employers say that those skills are important. Maybe how we're building those skills in might be different. I have a background in school counseling, and I have seen these skills maybe being brought more into the school counseling programs recently as we focus more on social emotional learning in addition to the academic and the career. So we're kind of seeing, the whole person being emphasized more than just looking at somebody's academic pathway. I really think that it's important that the skills are embedded in each step along the way. When we talk about early career interventions, we don't have to wait until students are in middle school and high school to start doing these sorts of things.
Can you tell us a story about using them earlier than middle school or in middle school?
Well, and one of the people I've been highlighting over the last couple of years in NCDA is a young teacher named Maddie Liggett in Michigan. And she really incorporates human skills into her whole classroom dynamic. So this idea of kind of, earning privileges through positive behavior and those sorts of things. And I've seen that worked into classrooms a good bit. I've seen it with my granddaughter when it's sort of a token economy, but where students learn that there are rewards to responsible behavior and to being a good helper, to being a good friend, all of those things that they're learning early on in school.
I love that example. And it's just like the workplace, right? You have incentive.
Exactly.
I
Right.
was also curious what you meant by seeing the whole child.
Often we talk about career development, and I think about this with the school counseling model too, where they have the academic domain, the career domain, and the social emotional domain. And sometimes it's helpful for planning to divide those up, but you can't really divide them up because the academic affects the social, which affects the career. They all work together. So as we work to teach a student, they bring themselves to the classroom, and we need to not just focus on one part of their life, but all of those domains have to work together. So I like to say all counseling is career counseling because it all works together.
And can you talk to us a little bit about that? One of the things we've noticed is that there's a lot less siloing going on around counseling. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
career counseling, there's academic counseling, there's teaching. But could you talk to us about the changing role of the counselor?
Mm-hmm. When I first started in counseling, a lot of my time was spent in scheduling students, changing student schedules, determining what classes students were going to take, and all that sort of thing. So the role of the counselor has really changed a great deal over the years to be very more programmatic. We talk about a school counseling program that includes your career programming, your, academic programming, as well as the social emotional learning. And I think over the past few years, there has been a greater emphasis on the social emotional learning role of the counselor because of a lot of social changes. Things like needing to manage crisis, needing to manage threat assessment in the schools, even. And when the pandemic came along and students lost connection, there were a lot of impacts from that, and so counselors needed to help students reconnect not only with faculty but with each other.
That makes sense. And you were talking a little bit about embedding human skills instruction in the classroom. Whose responsibility is it to teach human skills?
Well, I think it's everybody's responsibility in the whole school, actually. When we talk about connection with students, there's the importance of every student needs to connect with at least one adult in the school personally, and that makes a huge impact. So when I worked as a counselor, I used to always try to collaborate with classroom teachers as much as possible because learning primarily takes place in the classroom and in schools. That's where we focus our time. So I think we want to be embedding the skills in every level and helping teachers to show students how these skills can be important, not only for the content that they're learning, but in their lives. And most classroom teachers understand that students are going to resonate with that, and they're going to be better learners and get a lot more out of what they're learning if they apply it to themselves.
How does everyone stay on the same page around what these skills are? We have so many names for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
SkillsLine uses the term human skills because we believe that these are the skills that are uniquely human in an age of
Right.
artificial intelligence and automation. If there's so many people responsible for teaching the skills and bringing awareness to students, how do we keep everyone on the same page?
Well, I think you try to have a common vocabulary as much as possible in your school and your school system. That tends to come from your leadership and from your planning, and you try to use the same vocabulary. As you develop a program, you just try to be consistent with that.
Thank you. I believe that's important too. And what about with employers? How do we get them to understand
That's interesting, because when I was working with the experiential learning program, we actually developed what we called a career guide, and it was a database where we tried to connect students and employers. And one of the things that we dealt with was, we need a glossary, because how an employer defines an internship may be different from how the school defines an internship, or how the school speaks about a skill or something like that, and how the employers talk about it could be different. So we try to have this common vocabulary, and I think the common vocabulary is a very important part of what students are learning as well. Employers and the school system have to understand each other.
Yeah, we see that common language as a bridge, as the connective tissue in an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you, that idea?
Absolutely. And certainly, counselors need to be communicating with teachers in the school. That comes from your administration as well. If you want to embed certain concepts or certain values, you need to have that come from your administrators with cooperation from your counselors and your teachers, and everybody needs to work together on that.
That's great. I was curious about your relationship with SkillsLine and why you've become an advocate for our work.
Mm-hmm. Well, being as with a background in education, one of the first things that I really liked about SkillsLine, well, there are a couple of things, but the one that stands out the most to me is I love your micro lessons, because the lessons are set up in an easily usable way that if a teacher has, say, 10 minutes at the beginning of their class, they can easily bring in a micro lesson and really get some good conversation started. I also like the fact that you have the mobile learning, because students learn in a lot of different ways and they can sort of take that with them. I also like that you have sort of a curriculum in place. It's all planned out, where you identify the skills and this is how you teach these skills, because that's how education works. So your model really fits in to the work of the educator.
What would you say to educators that are looking to develop their own human skills instruction in terms of effort or tips? We believe that it's of paramount importance for folks to get this into the hands of students. We're an easy way to do that. Mm-hmm. But what advice would you offer to educators that are developing their own human skills curriculum?
Well, I think a lot of it is just looking through the lens of the kinds of skills that students need to develop to be successful in life and work. And so sometimes we get all bound up in the facts and the content of our curriculum, and sometimes we forget to look at how this actually relates to students' lives. So I think if we can sometimes step back from what we're teaching and think about Now, how is this going to impact a student's life? How can learning some of the human skills here really help them to become a whole person?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Okay, you mentioned earlier about a student needs a relationship with one person, right? And we hear a
Mhm.
lot, hey, this
Mhm.
relationships, we've never seen the kid like this before, et cetera, right?
Right.
You mentioned earlier that it's important for students to have a relationship with one adult at the school.
Mhm.
How do you see SkillsLine coming to play in that goal?
Yeah, well, I think it just opens up person to person conversation where people get to talk about their own lives, their own experiences. It could certainly allow a teacher or a coach or a principal or a counselor to hear what a student is talking about and to say, yeah, I understand that experience, and I had this experience in my life, so that they can have a back and forth kind of conversation. So I think it just opens up the ability to share in a way that is safe for people, safe for the student, safe for the teacher, or whoever is having that conversation.
Thanks, Celeste. And I think that that's a good point. It lowers the bar to getting vulnerable with each
Mm-hmm.
other, because
Right.
I think it builds that relationship between the adult and the students, or
Yeah.
a group of students.
Yeah, because the topics are general. You open up with a general topic, and then people can share at whatever level they're comfortable with, at that time.
So, what do you see exciting in the future? What about the role of the counselor moving forward as we enter this new age of artificial intelligence and automation?
This is going to be an amazing transition here that we're in. What it's going to do is open up more of that, of the ability of people to spend more time with those human connections if we use it the right way. Because we can spend less time trying to find information and spend more time talking about what that information means and how we can use it in relationships. People are certainly worried about artificial intelligence taking over their jobs. And I understand that to some extent, but say for counselors and teachers, it's going to shift. I think it's going to shift things in a way that helps them really create more connection instead of less if we can use it appropriately.
It's interesting you talk about that. One of the things that we've seen with SkillsLine is that we teach the skills, right? And that's not taking away somebody's job. Rather,
No.
that's sort of a standardization of it, right? So how do you see SkillsLine as a technology helping people and counselors connect with others or get their jobs done?
Well, it gives the framework, and that's, I think I've mentioned that before, that you have provided the framework with, say, here are the skills. And then people in schools, educators can look at those skills and say, oh, we are teaching that in all these different ways. And, then providing the frameworks for the conversations, so that you can figure out, if I want to have a conversation about teamwork, or I want to have a conversation about empathy or something like that, then you have some questions that you can start with on that.
That's great. I think, yeah, I agree with you. It sort of brings that human part forward, versus the rote and routine teaching of them, right?
Right. If you have it kind of in a lesson plan, then it's like, okay, this is part of the conversation that we're going to have, in our class. It's not like I just have to start a personal conversation. You can have a classroom conversation, and then the students get to interact with each other and have conversations about the topics.
Yeah, that's great. And we've seen that too with students going and talking to each other about reframing thoughts, or
Yeah,
hey, you got to actively listen now.
exactly. And they're going to learn a lot more from each other. If they say to each other, hey, can you reframe that? They're going to listen to another student probably more than they're going to listen to a counselor or a teacher.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm
Hmm.
starting to realize that with my own children for sure.
Yeah.
How does SkillsLine make it easy to bring human skills instruction to a district or to a school?
Well, I'd say a couple of ways. The first thing is the framework. And, educators work from goals and objectives. So educators are used to doing that, and the framework is set up so you know which skill you're working on, and it's set up in a kind of a laddered fashion, which I think educators are used to using as well. And for this particular type of learning, I think teachers want to kind of bring it in small doses. The example I like to compare it to is that in the English curriculum in the school system where I was, at the beginning of every class, they would come in and up on the board would be 2 or 3 sentences or a paragraph. And there would be grammar mistakes in there, and the students would have to find the grammar mistakes. And then for about the first 10 or 15 minutes of class, there was a conversation about that. So they were learning about grammar and all that sort of thing in a way that was not so boring. That could be really boring. But when you bring in some questions, some things that get students to think for themselves in short little bits, then they will engage. And so I see what you're doing with your micro lessons as the same sort of thing.
Thank you. What do you miss about the classroom?
Yeah, the interaction and the feedback with the students, and just being able to imagine where they might go in their lives. It's been so interesting to see students. Of course, I've been able to see students who've actually had careers and been in careers. And I was even able to invite some of them back to be speakers, to come to speak to other students. So that it's amazing when you see somebody and, hey, they really kind of struggled a little bit when they were in school. And one particular young man I can think of, he struggled a bit while he was in high school. He became a chiropractor. He came back to speak to the class about being a chiropractor, and he was so engaging, so real with the students. And he could say to them, hey, things aren't always easy, but, you can be successful.
Yeah, especially when you start to learn who you are, you get a certain level of maturity about who you are and acceptance of that, and you find what you're interested in. School doesn't always get you there. How did you transition to the Virginia Community College system?
Well, I actually did that after I retired. Well, I worked in education 30 years, and then I got to a point where I just wasn't feeling like I was productive, or just felt like I was in a rut. So, well, I've done this for 30 years. I can actually retire, and see what happens next. So before I retired, I became an instructor for facilitating career development, which is the basis of what I teach now. I had done some teaching at VCU. I taught the careers course there. So I was really just doing some substituting. And then a friend who I'd worked with as a counselor let me know there was this part-time job at the community college system. I said, well, how much time is it? He said, that's about 25 hours a week. I said, that may be too much. But it had to do with developing a curriculum for training career coaches. And, there's always this pull back and forth between school counselors or career coaches and, who's doing what in the school. I decided it might be a good role for me to be able to do some training. So I was going to do that for a year or two, and 11 years later, here I am.
That's awesome.
And the program that we developed, I think I sent out certificate number 1029 yesterday. So over 10 years, trained about over 1,000 people.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career counselor training program and how it incorporates human skills into it?
It's a kind of foundational career development where you learn about helping skills, you learn about career development theory, and that has human skills all throughout. How do we work with people, and how do we help them figure out, career decision making and things, determine their own values and all that sort of thing. So there was a program where they were going to employ career coaches, and they needed kind of a short-term training. So we developed learning modules and then some face-to-face training that I do with people. So it's about 40 hours worth. And people are very receptive to it because people come to this field from so many different backgrounds. They are so grateful to have the foundational knowledge because they've heard about some of these things. They know a little bit about interest inventories, but maybe they've never really heard what RIASEC is. So I'll say, oh, realistic, investigative, artistic. And they go, oh, yeah, I've heard that before. But they just don't really know how to put it all together. So they drink it in, really. They really appreciate it.
Now, when somebody has that type of expertise in career counseling and human skills, why would they consider SkillsLine as a tool?
Because it really helps to focus in on the topics. Bring in again, whenever I talk career coaches about creating interventions, I say to them, you need to start from a framework. You need to have a goal. You need to know where you want to go with people. Know what your objectives are and how you're going to get there. So generally, I'll even say, create your objectives. Then before you create the stuff in the middle, tell me how you're going to evaluate those objectives, and then go back and fill in the stuff in the middle. So SkillsLine, your program really does that for people. It gives them the objectives. This is where you want to go. This is where you want to get the student to be, and take these steps to get them there.
Well, thank you, Celeste. I really have appreciated your feedback. Any other final thoughts or wisdom that you'd like to impart to us?
I think it really is such a great tool for teachers and for counselors to be able to use. And so I just think that the different ways of being able to integrate this, or I like the word infusion. We want to infuse these things into the total curriculum. If you're going to ask teachers or counselors to do this kind of thing, and I'm coming from the administrative point of view at this point, that if you are an administrator or you're a superintendent who wants to integrate more human skills into your program, make it as easy as possible for your teachers and counselors to do this. Give them the tools that they need in order to do it, and they will come through for you.
Thank you very much, Celeste. We appreciate your final words of wisdom and your thoughts on human skills over time.
Well, thank you for contributing this. It's very much needed, and we appreciate your work in the field.
Thank you.